Greetings in the name of Christ, friends, on behalf of the Michigan Conference, 144 awesome churches and over 300 clergy. Blessings as we begin Pride Week. Let us open with a word of prayer. Gracious God, we ask that your wisdom guide us, open our hearts in grace and love and mercy. Allow us to walk in the light of Christ, spreading love and the peace that passes all human understanding. Amen. Hello, everybody. I'm Lillian Daniel, Michigan Conference Minister. It's wonderful to see you all. And today I'm so excited that as Pride Month is beginning with June, we're having a conversation about pronouns in the church. And I came to realize that something was changing in society, a long time ago, but it kind of, I'd always, as a pastor, had a good ministry with the queer community. But when I moved to Dubuque, Iowa, if any of you know Dubuque, Iowa, it was in 2016. And like any good pastor, I was out there just trying to get to know my new community. I would go to the, community theater or the art museum, and I saw an event that was transgender game night at a local bar. And I thought, well, that will be fun to go to too. And I would always do these things collared up as a way to meet people and hopefully have conversations about the wonderful church that I didn't yet know anything about. And so at transgender game night, it was really interesting to me because they had a younger crowd. And it turns out this event was kind of an alternative to the drinking and bar scene and stuff. It was actually a really nice thing. We played Monopoly and things like that. But it was a lot of teenagers, and I started to hear a lot about non-binary and they, them pronouns. And so I was learning about in that community. And then that same year, my own kid, my youngest kid, Ab, ended up coming out as non-binary to me. Now, Ab growing up, I'd always perceived Ab to be gay, and you can just tell with your kids what they get excited about and who they want to ask to the school dance. And Ab was not checking the majority boxes on that. And so that had been a long time in the past, but the non-binary thing was new for me. And I'm going to be honest and say that as a parent, I sort of was like, oh no, just when I thought I could get a gold star or a medal for knowing a lot about this, you're throwing something else at me that I'm going to be wrong about. and I had to do some learning about it. And it's been a fascinating journey for me. And now I look back, if I were to show you pictures of my kid Ab, you would say, oh my gosh, this does explain a lot. And so it was interesting to be a new pastor in Dubuque, Iowa, and have a trans kid and one who went by they, them pronouns in a space where nobody had kind of heard about that. And yet what I found out was like, they hadn't heard about it in my church, but they sure had heard about it in the high schools and the junior high schools. And later, of course, I came to find out that a lot of people in my church had heard about it through grandchildren, children, friends, etc. And like many of you have gone through an open and affirming process, once you start talking about these things, there's almost a coming out of the closet, not just of people in the community, but people who love people in the community. So like the grandparents of kids are coming out and saying, oh yeah, we have this too, or we have a nephew who has a different name now, and we don't know what to do with it. And so I just think the church is a great place to talk about this. Don't be embarrassed to ask a question. We have a fantastic presenter with us today, and Ringgold is going to introduce them.
Two people joining the Zoom room as you
Okay.
put me up on point. So
Oh,
hi,
well, while
everyone.
you're dealing with that,
I'm good.
I'll do a reminder. Everybody, look, you can change your name up at the top of your Zoom screen on the right-hand corner with the 3 dots, and you can add your pronouns. She, he, they, them. All right. Go ahead, Jen.
No, awesome, perfect. Welcome everyone. We're so excited that you're here today. We have a really large group, and we have an esteemed guest joining us today. We're super excited. I have had the pleasure of working with JM in another collaborative effort, and I'm so excited that they are with us. JM Richardson is the Education and Facilitation Management Specialist at the Ruth Ellis Center in Detroit, and brings a wealth of knowledge in regards to this topic to share with all of us today. And just in case you were wondering, yes, the last name does match that of our Associate Conference Minister Lawrence Richardson, and yes, big hearts there, as they are married. And that is one of the wonderful ways that we have come to connect with JM as well. So without further ado, I will be sharing slides for JM, and they get to take over from now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be asked to be here with the Reverend Dr. Lillian Daniel. Appreciate you calling me. I'm going to jump right in as soon as I can see my slides here. All right. All right. Excellent. So I'm going to just be speaking really quick about widening the welcome with pronouns in the church. Creating safe, brave spaces. Again, my name is Rev JM Richardson. I use they, them, and he, his pronouns, and so you can use either for conversation today. Go to the next slide, please. Just a basic understanding of why we are here today. We are here to speak to the importance of respecting people's genders pronouns. We do understand that using and respecting people's gender pronouns is essential for affirming their identity, for promoting safety, fostering inclusivity, and creating a respectful and supportive community. Next slide, please. So I just want to just create a framework or a grounding to understand what pronouns are. Pronouns are words used in place of a noun to refer to someone. So we use pronouns if we say, whose wallet is that? And you can say, that's her wallet, that's his wallet, or that's their wallet. Whose water is that? That's their water, that's his water, that's her water. And so those are what we say when we're talking about pronouns. And the common pronouns that you hear mostly in this setting and settings around the United States would be he, she, and they. There are some other pronouns that are not as familiar for the time today. We're only going to be focusing on these three. Again, these are not limited to these three, but just to provide an understanding. He, him, his is more of a masculine pronoun. She, her, hers is a feminine pronoun, excuse me. They, them, their is a neutral pronoun. Next slide, please. So in order to have conversation around pronouns, we need to understand a little bit around what is someone's gender identity and gender expression, because often these are conflated with assigned sex at birth. And so what assigned sex at birth is, it's determined by physical anatomy, typically labeled as male, female, or intersex. Assigned sex is typically listed on our birth certificate, where it is something that a midwife, a doctor, or medical staff will determine and record by looking at physical external anatomy. This is what most of society resonate with this, where their gender identity matches their sex assigned at birth. However, there is a group of people, less than 10% of our population in many studies, a little more in some, that have a gender identity, which is something that we define internally and share with others, that is different than their assigned sex, right? Because historically, assigned sex and gender identity were viewed as congruent or same, but we're pointing out the differences and variations that exist and the results of making assumptions on this particular gender identity. I want to bring for consideration some music people that are in the room. We have artists like David Bowie. We have artists like the artist formerly known as Prince, who played around with gender identity and gender expression, which we'll see on the next slide. With gender expression being different from gender identity is that gender expression is how we express our gender. and it is independent of our identity. Is it okay to go to the next slide? I don't know. There we go. And this includes our clothing, our behavior, our voice, and etc. Some people say this is what I was taught. I was taught that men behave in this way. I was taught that women behave in this way. And this is where a lot of the gender expression comes into play, because our brains move in a way that we want to make quick assumptions around what we see so that we can identify it and we can determine whether or not it is safe or not. So because of this, we think about gender in a binary form, and we think about it based upon what we've been taught for generations, centuries. And now that we have more information, we have more science, we have more testimonials, we have more people being willing to come out and be honest around who they are. We now know and see and identify and affirm that gender expression is very varied, even across the common male and female presentation, or what we'd like to say, masculine and feminine presentations. As you can see on the pictures, there's a plethora of people who look different, who you cannot discern based upon just appearances. You would have to ask them what their pronouns are. Next slide, please. So this is an infographic that we use in a lot of our trainings with MDHHS and others, and that you can go online to itspronouncedmetrosexual.com and receive this. Also, I believe that these slides will be offered and available. And what this does for us is it allows a visual so that we can see the differences and similarities that we have used in times past. Okay, so you see at top, you see gender identity. That's mostly in the brain, so that's internal. You see it goes from 0 to womanness or 0 to manness. I don't particularly necessarily like the language that's used here. I use this language also because this is language that calls people in. This is language that people can understand. But what this says is gender identity is how in your head you define your gender based upon how you align or don't align with what you understand to be the options for gender. You see examples here: woman, man, two-spirit, gender queer. Stepping down to gender expression, from the 0 or none to masculine, feminine, this is how we present our gender through our actions, through our dress, our demeanor. This is how presentations are interpreted based upon gender norms. And so then you have common language like butch, femme, androgynous, gender neutral. Those are those you just don't quite fit in boxes. And so sometimes that's even conflated with non-binary. Usually those are correlated, but that's not a causation. Going down a little more, you have biological sex. This is synonymous with assigned sex at birth. This is more of a medical term. This is still not as accurate as it can be, because we understand now through science that intersex have different hormone or chromosomal changes that may not be seen in the outside experience, or it may not show up in primary or secondary sex organs, but it is something different. However, we see the maleness and the femaleness, which is where we have the male, the female, the intersex, and then our it says male to female, female, which we don't use that within our personal trainings, but this is on the screen, so I want to honor that. What we really want to give in this understanding is that you cannot know who someone is unless you have relationship with them. And understanding that we are speaking to individuals who know how to have relationship. This is why asking about pronouns is so important, because it allows the space for you not to assume that you understand someone's identity, someone's attraction, even someone's expression, or someone's assigned sex at birth. Next slide, please. One of the most common pushbacks that we have around pronouns is the singular they. So I wanted to bring, some historical context, and then also bring it to home in today's language. So the singular they dates back to 1375 and is used by notable writers like Chaucer, Shakespeare, and Jane Austen. It was first recorded in the English translation of the French story William and the Wolf. And notably also, the singular they was used alongside thou. And, us in the church, we know a thou and a them, because that is what I grew up saying. And so that is also a singular form of you, which is later invoked to allow you to be used for both singular and plural references. So when Jesus said thou fools, he was speaking in plural, but it also can be used as thou being you in singular. So in modern acceptance, we go to the dictionary, right? Because the dictionary, even though we understand that all words are made up, we want to provide a system so that we can communicate effectively. And so going to the modern dictionaries like the Oxford English Dictionary and the Merriam-Webster, they recognize the singular they, even in their definitions. And it also is understood to be used widely to refer to the non-binary individuals, or when gender is unknown. So if you have not asked someone their pronouns, it is mostly understood and is widely accepted to defer to the they until you can discern, or till they, not till you discern, excuse me, that's the wrong language, until they tell you their pronouns, and then you can shift to the pronouns that they resonate with, they affirm with. So bringing this all together, I know you said, JM, thank you for all this information. That was really good grounding information. What does that have to do with me? What does it have to do with the church? Why share pronouns? I'm so glad you asked. Next slide, please. So the reason why I believe that we need to be intentional around sharing pronouns is the fact that we are creating safe and brave spaces. There is a preponderance of data, a preponderance of information through Trevor Project, through so many other family acceptance project, where we have seen that using incorrect pronouns can cause harm and invalidate someone's identity. In fact, there are some studies that say misgendering individuals or not using their affirmed name, that causes them to be 8 times more likely to follow through in suicide ideations, or greater levels of depression, possible drug use, and other things that are comorbidities of people not being accepted and affirmed in their environment. And so using correct pronouns can provide safety, promote safety and respect. It can affirm people where there's other studies that say if one affirming person is in a young person's life, it can save their lives. And also there's other studies as well that says that church communities are one of the 3 greatest places that young people, especially those that are LGBTQ, can find safety, and if we find respect that can allow them to grow into a more healed individual. Here's a simple thing as well. You just can't know someone by looking at them. And I think that is the larger narrative that's bumping up against some of the other things that we're thinking about in the country. And this is why the stakes feel high. I understand that we don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to make mistakes either, and I appreciate that. And the reality of it is that we have not been able to push through this social contract in this way until now. And so, yes, we are bumping up against conventionality. We're bumping up against many things that causes us to think about being right or wrong. And there is a potential of harm that can be placed upon people if you are intentionally misgendering them. Making a mistake, you just say, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake, and you ask for correction, and then you move on. This lets individuals know as well that you are a safe space. Also, providing your own pronouns. You see in the picture, I put a little name tag, hello, my name is, and my pronouns are they, them. That automatically shows other people that you are willing to engage in safety and in health around them with their pronouns. And this is just a small step that I believe that the church writ large can do to begin to welcome conversations from people with lived experience. One of the things that we teach in our trainings is that people with lived experience are experts in their own lives. And I know that we have a lot of information. We have a lot of academic information. We have a lot of reading. A lot of us are educated in so many different ways. And at the end of the day, the best teacher is someone with that lived experience that can be in relationship with you and communicate to you in honesty and transparency and in love and with grace so that we can all learn together. So the final slide, I just want to give some takeaways, some very simple takeaways that I believe with my presentation and what I was called here today to do is what we can do right now to move forward. We don't have to be right. We don't have to figure it all out. It doesn't have to make sense to you for you to be respectful. There is an importance in sharing your pronouns and knowing that you can say, I am, my pronouns is he, him. I always use he, him, and that's what my pronouns are. You don't have to change your pronouns. You don't have to find a new pronoun. The pronoun that you say or that others say about you that you feel most comfortable with, those are your affirmed pronouns. Avoiding assumptions. I mean, that goes across the board, right? We have so many intersections and so many places of our social identity that may look different, may sound different, or may even occupy spaces differently. And so not making assumptions around individuals, all individuals, can allow us to have better communication about who we are and who we want to show up in the world as. And finally, of course, respect and affirmation. You don't have to get it right. You don't have to know how to get it right, but we do know how to respect an individual. And so I just offer that if we respect each other in a way that if someone calls you in for correction, that you honor the person and you move in a correct manner, that affirmation that happens even in that apology or that, oh, my bad, or excuse me, and fixing it is more than many people receive in a day. And I do believe that that is part of the good news. I do believe that is the news that we have, that we are going out into the world and we are compelling people to come into relationship with us. The final slide is just a slide of resources. Thank you so much for your time. I just want to offer a couple of resources at the position in which I occupy, the Ruth Ellis Center. We do quarterly trainings. And so if you have a group of volunteers or others who want to come to a training, I definitely can give you some dates. There's some virtual dates as well as in-person dates in Detroit, as well as a Journey Ahead program for young people who are in connection with MDHHS. So if you have young people in your church, I encourage you to put this flyer up around your church. They can go and find out more information for themselves. That's all I have for my presentation. I definitely will turn it back over to Reverend Doctor, and we can have questions and comments.
Let's all thank our presenter. That was excellent. Thank you for setting that up. So let me dig into this a bit with a little theological reflection and then a discussion of where the rubber meets the road on this. So the theological reflection I want to share is that when I've experienced tension around pronouns, it's often when somebody is perceived to have made a change. So I always knew you as Mary, and now you're Martin, but I've known you since you were a baby, so you have to understand I'm special, and I'm going to always call you Mary, right? And that's what we get. We just say, like, everybody else can go with this trendy thing, but not me, because I've known you since you were this big and blah, blah, blah. And often parents will act like that, let's be honest, or family members or cousins or whatnot. But in the Bible, there's actually a lot of attention paid to names. If you notice, and there are many examples of people having a name change. And usually that comes through a conversion or an experience with the divine or the Holy Spirit. So the Bible is full of examples of this. Saul becomes Paul, Abram becomes Abraham, Sarai becomes Sarah, all at which are these moments of transition and identity change that are really important. And in the Bible, even thousands of years back, people don't go like, oh, Abram, it's so hard for me to remember that your name is Abraham. I'll just always think of you as Abram. Like, it's just too much, And this is just commonplace, right? It was understood that people go through transformations and change, and a lot of times that's a divine impulse. So Similarly, in our culture, there's all sorts of name changes that people are very easy with. For example, when a woman gets married, people will often say, oh, like, are you going to change your name? And they're open to it and they expect it. In my case, when I got married, I didn't change my name. And the person who couldn't deal with that was my own father, whose name I was keeping. Wrap your head around that. And he would consistently address letters to me, because back in the days of letters, that were in this name that was not my own. And I would respond, I'm keeping your name, you should be flattered. And it got so tense that at one point I put return to sender on the mail that he was sending me. And when that happened, my father got really angry. And he was not a swearing man in front of his child usually. But he called me up and he was like, blankety blank this and blankety blank that. And you can't send mail back to me. He goes, Lillian, I'm all for this. Like, I understand this trendy feminism and blah, blah, blah. But this is the blankety blank US Postal Service. And you don't blankety blank with the US Postal Service or put you in blankety blank jail. And I was like, can you listen to yourself? And at that point, we started laughing. But, even like that's an example of societal expectations where people want you to change your name. And yet, when a person says, this never felt like my name, that feels like a dead name to me. That never felt like who I was. And now I'm sharing this with you. People say, oh, it's just too hard. I can't get my head around it. So just a reminder that every time we read from the Apostle Paul in church, we don't go into a long preamble about, but for those of you who knew him, his name used to be Saul, and I really know him as Saul because I know him when he's a baby, right? We don't do that. We show respect. And also the point about kindness. In the church, we're meant to show hospitality, and we're meant to bend over backwards for the stranger and the other person. And I think this is a kindness and generosity issue. And so we say to entertain the stranger as if angels are present. We say, be the hands and feet of Christ. We extend ourselves to understand people who are different from us. And to not do that in this area, it kind of smacks of arrogance. And an example I would use is, hopefully none of us do this today, but I remember growing up that there were times when people in my family, if they were introduced to somebody who had a name that was from a country or language they were not familiar with, they would say, I can't pronounce that. That's just too hard. So I'm going to call you something else. So the person would be like, my name is Samira. And they'd be like, well, I'm just going to call you Sammy. Today, that would feel so obnoxious to us. And yet that behavior seems to be tolerated in this setting. So we have to look at what prejudices are still acceptable in the world and challenge them. And then the other thing I've learned is that there's a way in which, when you're kind of in the majority of whatever the culture is, you don't notice what it's like for the other people. So I'm going to confess here that back in like 2015, when I started going to meetings where people would do pronouns around the room, I would think, well, I don't have to say it. It's obvious, like, this is kind of silly. It took me a minute to understand that my saying my pronouns allowed other people to say theirs. It was a form of generosity and hospitality. It wasn't for me, right? It was for others, and to be the gracious host. And the other thing I learned along the way is that so often the person in the minority situation or pushing the boundaries of something new is the one left to explain themselves. And imagine just how hard it is to explain yourself if you've ever had to do that. Explain something about your right to be in the room, as a woman minister, as what have you. And then to think about how much it meant to you if somebody else picked that up. And so if you're with somebody and a stranger misgenders them, you say something. You say, actually, it's not he, it's she, or whatever it is. Like, you pick it up, and that you carry that you do some of the explaining, because it's a heavy load for the person in it. And the last thing I'll say that I learned the hard way is I'm going to make an analogy here. When I was first leading youth groups as a seminarian, I knew that you couldn't swear in front of the kids. So I would swear on my own time, I'm going to confess it, but with the kids, I would be very careful not to say those words. But you only have to be in a car with 5 kids and accidentally run a stop sign once when all those words pour out of your mouth. Because you don't practice not swearing in private. You just hope that you can rein it in. This is what I've learned about pronouns and name changes, is that if you're in the family and you address the person with the correct name when you're with them, but then when y'all are all talking and saying, what are you getting for Christmas? And you say, well, they're not here right now. Like, I can just say this. We all understand we're the family. Practice makes perfect. And if you don't practice it behind the person's back, you're going to get it wrong in front of them. We are not geniuses. Instinct kicks in. And then the last thing is that when you do make a mistake, because I think we all will, this happens to all of us, right? And we accidentally get it wrong. There was a time when I felt like that was an occasion for me to give a long speech about why I made the mistake and how hard it was for me. And apparently that's not well received. And I now understand that, like, when I would stop everything, like, oh my gosh, I made that mistake. But you have to understand, like, I've had a long night and I took some Sudafed, or I'm remembering you since you were 2, or it's just so hard, and like, blah, blah, blah. And by then I've derailed the whole conversation and made it about me. And we were talking about vacation plans, and we can't go back to that because then I'm going to come back again. They're going to say, never mind that. Like, I'm going to Hawaii. And I'm going to be like, speaking of Hawaii, I feel so bad that I did that. Oh my gosh. Like, I want to apologize again. It's all about me. It's all about me. It's all about me. It's not respectful. And I've learned the best thing to say is, oh, I'm sorry. I meant to say this. So with that, I'm going to kind of open this up a bit. And actually, I'm going to ask JM, I've asked him in advance, but if you take if you've gone through your professional presentation, maybe a little personal sharing of your own about when you kind of encountered the non-binary idea, the pronouns, and all of that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that that theological conversation, because it is so true. And I chuckle and laugh because that cursing thing, I'm from my background is in a very parochial church, and so if you cursed, you was going to hell. And so we didn't curse in public or in front of people, but we sure slipped it out every once in a while, stubbing a toe, somebody in traffic, somebody getting on your nerves. But like I said, I came from a more conservative background, born and raised. I've been doing ministry for, well, I've been ordained for 25 years, but I've been doing ministry for over 30 years in so many capacities. And I didn't appreciate what it means to be LGBTQ until most recently, around 10 years ago. That being said, I've come out as non-binary within the last 5 or 6 years. And that was a journey that I did not start within myself, but I saw it within one of the young people who I had adopted as a spiritual child. And we were planting churches. We were in Chicago at the time, and they came out as non-binary. And I was like, hold on a minute, I gotta go do some research. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to go to a they, them, because I have heard that as a derogatory, them over there, right? And so it was also a thing, like, I didn't want to offend. And again, to your point, Reverend Doctor, I was thinking about me instead of thinking about them. So I went and I prayed about it, and I did a whole lot of research, and I said, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna try this. Please forgive me if I mess it up, but I'm gonna honor you. Long story short, we actually had to shut that church down because there was even conflict within the congregation and also within the wider community. They could not see someone who still was very masculine in some of their appearances wearing high heels in the pulpit preaching. And so that really jarred me. I was like, we're supposed to be the church, right? And we're supposed to be welcoming. We're supposed to be inclusive. And yet we're still having a hard time around pronouns. We're having a hard time around transness and non-binary individuals. And then I began to look inside, and I found out that inside I didn't believe in gender in this way. I wanted to be what I believe Jesus it was, and Jesus was a representation of the eternal, and the eternal had many representations that weren't all masculine, and I want to be more like that. And so that began my hard and arduous task of shifting not only my theological interpretations, but also me as someone who is adopted, who names are very important to me because I have legally had to change my name now 4 times. And so my familial connections are gone because the last name doesn't mean the same. I didn't know my biological family till I was well in my 30s. And so the concept of even knowing in Proverbs, this is a great name is better than any riches. What is a great name when your name changes every 10 years or 5 years or 7 years? And so I had to come to terms with that. With now I need to change my name again to something that is me. What is me when all of these other places and things happen? And then I got into work. And when I got into the work, I began to talk to young people who already had the language, who already had the audacity, who already had the tenacity, who already had the grace to explain to me as a 30-some-year-old, now 40, that this is what it means to be non-binary. This is what it means to think outside of gender roles. And that was an epiphany for me that even expanded my understanding around God. It understanding of who is my neighbor, who is my kin, who is brother and sister, which, we always came from. I came from down south. So ma'am and sir was always in my language. I had to take that out and still figure out how to give respect. It's hard. It's difficult, yet I see the result of it every day when I use pronouns that are affirming and people's eyes light up, or the pressure on their shoulders go away and they realize that you're a safe space. You don't have all the answers, but you're a safe space. I can give you a smile and you can smile back at me because you see me. You see me, and that makes me real. And when I felt that for myself in my identity, in my true identity, that made my ministry change. That made my connections and relationships with others change. It made the love of God blow up in my heart. That is like, it's not about me. It's about asking you who you are. And that's always the first step in what it is to bring the good news and God's spell to others.
Thank you so much, Jam, for sharing that personal story. So let's open it up to the group. Does anybody have a question, or how does this rubber hit the road in the life of the church for you all? And what have you experienced and what have you learned? Yes, Leanne.
Yeah, I just have to thank you all for these conversations and these stories today. This is so helpful to me. Every week at Parables, the ministry I lead in Chelsea, we pray, Our Mother and Father who art in heaven. And I often, when we have new people visiting, kind of, before we start that prayer, and we use sign language as we pray verbally as well, I often say, we know that God is beyond gender. And so we use these terms in order to help capture that. But today, I'm just so grateful because I'm like, I always use God language, as awkward as it can be. Rather than female or male pronouns, I've just always used the noun God, if God is a noun, but maybe more of a verb. And so I just feel like today the dots connected. I'm like, no, I should be using they. Like, it just makes total sense, right? God is non-binary as well. So this has been really helpful for me. I really appreciate it.
That's fascinating. And there's great stuff written on the book of Genesis and the creation story, where, there's 2 creation stories. One's kind of sexist and involves Eve's coming out of Adam's rib, but the other one is male and female, God created them. That mystery is in there. Others. Like, be willing to give us a hard situation that we can, brainstorm together on. Oh, I see Mary has a hand up. Unmute.
There, how's that? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm from Grand Blanc. We're just kind of have started our O&A process about 6 months ago. So we're in the middle of it right now. Learning lots about ourselves and our church and everything. I have a transgender, not my niece now, was my nephew for many years. And so I understand that struggle of trying to get the pronouns correct. But again, like you said, when I get it wrong, I just say to her, I'm sorry, meant to say this. And remembering to do it when she's not with me, referring to Danny as she instead of he. I'm still getting used to that, but I'm working on it. I'm kind of curious, because as we're going through this process of O&A, I think about our bathrooms, which are labeled man and woman. Have any of you in your churches changed that, done something about that? How do we make our restrooms more welcoming?
I see Mike's got an answer. Mike Tupper.
So we changed our men's bathroom to a all gender, I think is the reference we use. So instead of it saying men, it says all gender above that. And both of our bathrooms happen to be single stall type things.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the idea of simply changing the name on one of those two bathrooms to all gender to make it inclusive for all people.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of creative things, and great to see Grand Blanc on this Zoom today. I loved being with you last Sunday, but I was recently visiting the Battle Creek Church, and they had, I think that is a great model, as this sort of single bathroom that's for everybody. And there are fun signs you can get for the door that, are playful and interesting. But at Battle Creek, they had a full bathroom with stalls, and it had urinals, but the sign was that this is for everybody, right? And anybody remember the show Ally McBeal?
Yeah.
Where they had the bathroom that the men and women used together, and it makes so much sense. But I think the urinal part is a little awkward, and so it was interesting to be going into that bathroom. We were having our board of directors meeting there, and a guy came in when I was in there washing my hands, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," and kind of ran out. So, it's a work in progress, but I think to have some grace and be willing to experiment is a wonderful thing.
So Tracy Blackman was just in the Kansas City airport and made a video on Facebook, a live video about in the Kansas City airport, they have an all gender bathroom, and it's all stalls, and it's everybody goes in one door and everybody comes out the other door. And she was just she's like, I love Kansas City. She's like, they figured it out. But I mean, it's not always that easy in a church when you have urinals or you have limited bathrooms, right? Like in the smaller spaces. And at UCC Midland, we have gendered bathrooms, and then we have single stall bathrooms in another location in the building, and those have all gender signs. So it's being creative.
I mean, I think we all remember, less than 10 years ago, the big fracas about bathrooms in North Carolina. And they did not serve themselves well with that law preventing people from being creative and open with the bathrooms. It cost them a huge amount of business. It didn't reflect well on the state. But just a fact that I thought was helpful to just remind people of, when people said, what about children in the bathroom? And, it could be like a man who's dressed as a woman in there with little girls. The people in danger in public bathrooms are generally the trans people. I mean, that's a place where people get beat up. And that's the group that has the biggest concern. But standing next to somebody to wash your hands, for goodness sake. Others.
I will share that with young people, non-binary young people or trans young people, that is having bathrooms that are labeled all gender or gender neutral is a there are kids who don't go to the bathroom like during the day at school. They or when they're out in a public place. I've had young people on youth trips be like, will you wait outside the door, or because it is in that situation, they are the ones who are unsafe. And so so creating safe spaces and safe bathrooms in a church can be a really powerful affirming thing.
And have any of you experienced, though, people in churches saying, well, that's not an issue in our church? Like, we've never heard. And the logic there, right, is, yeah, because probably people checked out the space and didn't come back.
Mhm.
Jen, say a word about your work with youth and youth ministry and giving a little perspective on this issue for us.
Yeah, so in general, young people in their teenage years they're past this. My middle school, when my daughter was in middle school, I got to the point where I had to refer to all of her friends as they. Like, that was just my mom, you don't know. And past it. Like, they just don't want to, like, they want to have safe spaces. They want you to ask them their pronouns. They want, no assumptions made about anything. And so it's a generational gap in that regards, of people who are like, well, we don't need to talk about this, versus people who are like, we expect you to have already moved past this. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for being open to having the conversation. Thank you for standing in the gap.
All right. I think we can have one more question from Melanie Johnson there.
Hi, thank you for conversations here. This is great stuff. I had a situation where I admit I thought something was obvious and it apparently wasn't. And I said, hi, my name is Melanie. Welcome. And can I ask how I can address your pronoun? And the reply was, well, what does that mean? And I was like, oh, okay. And so then I was like, well, what's your name? Well, you can call me CJ. And then that was it. And then it was like a reverse about face, and off they walked. And I was like, gosh, did I say something wrong? I thought I'd had it right. But so I was just wondering, MJ or JM from anybody, how does that guide me? Did I do something wrong there?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to this. I want to take emphasis off of right and wrong, and I want to say what you did was not incorrect. And there's a way to go to a default, which is a they, them in that instance. If they do not give you a pronoun, you just say, okay. And when you refer to them, you can refer to them as CJ. So CJ is walking over there and CJ's seat is there. Or you can say CJ is walking over there and their seat is there. Because there is, I believe, going to be, and I've seen, a pushback from individuals who have had a lot of vitriol around pronouns. And so sometimes people who are part of the LGBTQ community has not have conversations themselves around pronouns. And they don't know how to, because they've not experienced a safe space and where they can entertain, engage, be curious about their pronouns. And so they've walked around with this, you're going to call me whatever you're going to call me. Why are you asking me? And then there's others who just don't know how to answer that. And so I think that you did a very beautiful and brave thing. And I think that this is part of that conversation that we should continue, is introducing yourselves. Hi, my name is JM. I use they, them pronouns. What is your name and pronouns? If they don't give you pronouns, you just say, thank you for your name. And you either default to a they, them pronoun, or you speak to them always in their name with their noun. And when we get more comfortable in society around having conversations like that, I believe that more of the movable middle will begin to not be as defensive or not be as ignorant or not be as obtuse around the ideas of pronouns, and then we'll be able to have a longer conversation.
Oh, this is great. All right. But whatever your pronouns are, we promised we'd let you go at 12:45. So let me say a blessing, but then you're welcome to stay on and chat. So may the peace of Christ that passes all human understanding fill your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God and the power of the Holy Spirit to understand one another in the deepest way in which God understands each of us. Amen.